11. Thanks for being with us today on Shine FM for another edition of Journey Living with Shannon Meyer. The foundation of Journey Living Ministries is Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. Journey Living is a radio broadcast featuring the Bible teaching of Shannon Meyer. Shannon's passion is to help women walk with God through the trials and challenges of life. Speaking from her own life experiences and a biblical foundation, Shannon offers women hope that God does have a plan, even when we don't see it. Now here's Shannon with today's teaching.
Have you ever had one of those times where you have been praying for a loved one or diligently seeking the Lord for breakthrough in your own life, and it seems that the harder you pray, the more intense things become? Maybe you're praying for a lost family member that's headed for disaster, and you feel the more you take them to the foot of the cross or boldly come before the throne, you are met with great and even greater opposition. You may even feel as though this is not working and my prayers are not even being heard. You may think God's too busy or the person is too far gone and God will not redeem or save this situation. I know, as I have earnestly prayed for my loved ones or someone that God has put in front of me to help minister to, or to help lead them to Christ, it often feels like the situation grows even more chaotic than ever before. Ever heard the saying, "It's darkest just before the dawn"? That is very, very true in these situations as well. Oftentimes, just before we encounter our breakthrough, or someone we're pleading for has their breakthrough come forth, it gets really, really dark right before it happens. And I wish I had $1 for every time I would fight in prayer for someone's soul or their healing or their breakthrough, and all I was met with was more opposition. Whether that be from themselves or from some outside force. You have to know that when you go and start fighting for a lost soul, all of hell will come against you. And the enemy and his emissaries are not bothered by people who do not pray or Christians who do not know how to pray or go into battle on behalf of someone else. But bring a mighty prayer warrior to the battlefield and see what happens. You literally have awakened all that holds that person captive, and you have begun to rattle the cages of the evil one, and he will come back with a vengeance. Now, this is not to scare you or even deter you from ever praying and going to battle for those lost around you. But we're at war, friends. We are not in friendly territory, and this is not a walk in the park, as many Christians want to believe. Do you know if Satan gets us to believe that there is nothing that we can do about a situation, then he's won. His greatest weapon of all time is to lull us to sleep. For us to think that this is way beyond our realm and that it will take God to make this happen, or a complete miracle, we might as well just leave well enough alone. And you're right. It will take God to save this person's soul or heal their body and mind. But it's up to us as soldiers in God's army to fight and fight and fight on their behalf until he returns. Now, someone might be saying about now, Shannon, I have fought the good fight and I don't have anything left in me to continue on. And I understand that too, because I've been there. But we have to regain strength in the Lord and get back out there. For the time is coming when we will not be able to go back and bring anyone with us any longer. God gives strength to the weary in our greatest hour of need. Some people say that time is not on our side, that we're running out of time. We must hurry and believe that there is some truth to that. But you have to realize that we are on the upswing of time as well. We're headed for eternity. We are eternal beings. God has plucked us right out of eternity and placed us here on earth for this very moment in time. He has a plan for your life at this very date on the calendar. He planned for you to be a part of this generation, whether you like that or not. And he has not made a mistake to use your body, mind, and spirit to be a willing participant in his eternal doing. Sometimes we think, God, you must have missed it by a generation. I'm old-fashioned and I don't want to live here. I want to live back in the good old days. And that might be true to some extent for all of us, because we all want to live in a better time. But God doesn't make mistakes, and you are where you are today because God planned it that way. Even if you were conceived out of wedlock, or even by a crime like rape, or if your parents had given you up for adoption and you felt though there had been no meaning of your life whatsoever, God sees it another way. He says, I want to use you in this year, this decade, this generation for my glory. I have work for you to do, and it's going to take getting to know me and watching the ways I do life for you to be successful and win the battle that is ever before you. So let me take you back a minute to the praying for someone and seeing no change in this person, to have any resolve in the matter or no better health condition. What then? Do you quit talking to God? Do you quit praying, seeking, and doing? Or do you press through? Do you try and try again? I want to read a fascinating story where Daniel prayed like never before and his prayer was delayed. But not because God didn't hear him or want to answer him, but because there was opposition along the way. And that answered prayer was not given to him at the time of his request, because the enemy stood in the way of the one trying to bring the deliverance to pass. So I'm going to be reading out of Daniel 10, starting in the first verse. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Caesar of Persia, Daniel had another vision. He understood that the vision concerned events certain to happen in the future, times of war and great hardship. When this vision came to me, I, Daniel, had been in mourning for 3 weeks. All that time I had eaten no rich food, no meat or wine crossed my lips, and I used no fragrant lotions until those 3 weeks had passed. On May 23rd, as I stand on the bank of the great Tigris River, I looked up and saw a man dressed in linen clothing with a belt of pure gold around his waist. His body looked like a precious gem. His face flashed like lightning, and his eyes flamed like torches. His arms and feet shone like polished bronze, and his voice roared like a vast multitude of people. Only I, Daniel, saw this vision. The men with me saw nothing, but they were suddenly terrified and ran away to hide. So I was left there all alone to see this amazing vision. My strength left me, my face grew deathly pale, and I felt very weak. Then I heard the man speak, and when I heard the sound of his voice, I fainted and laid there with my face to the ground. Just then a hand touched me and lifted me, still trembling, to my hands and knees. And the man said to me, Daniel, you are very precious to God. So listen carefully to what I have to say to you. Stand up, for I have been sent to you. When he said this to me, I stood up, still trembling. Then he said, Don't be afraid, Daniel. Since the first day you began to pray for understanding and to humble yourself before your God, your request had been heard in heaven. I have come in answer to your prayer. But for 21 days, the spirit prince of the king of Persia blocked my way. Then Michael, one of the archangels, came to help me, and I left him there with the spirit prince of the king of Persia. Now I'm here to explain what will happen to your people in the future, for this vision concerns a time yet to come. While he was speaking to me, I looked down at the ground, unable to say a word. Then the one who looked like a man touched my lips, and I opened my mouth and began to speak. I said to the one standing in front of me, I'm filled with anguish because of the vision I've seen. My Lord, and I'm very weak. How can someone like me, your servant, talk to you, my Lord? My strength is gone, and I can hardly breathe. Then the one who looked like a man touched me again, and I felt my strength returning. Don't be afraid, he said, for you are very precious to God. Peace, be encouraged, be strong. As he spoke those words to me, I suddenly felt stronger and said to him, Please speak to me, my Lord, for you have strengthened me. Verse 20, he replied, Do you know why I have come? Soon I must return to fight against the spirit prince of the kingdom of Persia, and after that the spirit prince of the kingdom of Greece will come. Meanwhile, I'll tell you what is written in the book of truth. No one helps me against these spirit princes except Michael, your spirit prince. Isn't that an incredible story? I'll tell you what, I often find myself reading that over and over again when I've not heard from the Lord in a timely manner in which I think he should answer me, or when I'm troubled about something that the Lord has shown me about someone else. Could this also happen to us, like what happened here to Daniel? I believe it very well could. I believe it does. When we pray, we often think of God as a genie in a bottle, and when our prayers are not answered immediately, then we assume God's not on our side or he's not working on our behalf. But we can see very clearly here that God says, most assuredly, he was working and giving Daniel the strength and power, not only to him, but to the angels as well. So let's look a little closer into this story and see where we could be encouraged to wait on the Lord and be filled with his strength, just like Daniel. Daniel says partway through verse 16, I'm filled with anguish because of the vision I've seen, my Lord, and I'm very weak. How can someone like me, your servant, talk to you, my Lord? My strength is gone and I can barely breathe. Verse 18, then the one who looked like a man touched me again, and I felt my strength returning. Don't be afraid, he said, for you are very precious to God. Peace. Be encouraged. Be strong. You have to see here that God is for us. He knows when we've run out of strength and we can hardly breathe anymore. He encourages us not to be afraid, for you are very, very precious to God. Just like what a father would say to his children who may find themselves scared in the middle of the night over simply being in the dark. He says, I'm here with you. I'll give you peace and to be strong. This is a charge to all of us. He doesn't want us living defeated or underneath the feet of the enemy. Sometimes the best thing to say is what Daniel said, Lord, speak to me. When we hear from God, we are filled with a holy strength. It's like hearing a motivational speaker on steroids. Not saying that God's a motivational speaker, but you know how enthusiastic you feel when you've left a great motivational conference? You're ready to take on the world. The same is true for Daniel here as well. He's been in a really dark place. He's been fasting and mourning over his people. He's been given a vision of what's to come, and it frightens him. But God sends an angelic being to comfort him and to encourage him to keep on keeping on. One thing I think we often forget or even don't know about because we're not taught it is that we have authority and we have the power to help answer those prayers ourselves. Now, I didn't say that we are like God, but when Jesus left this earth, he very much left his power with us to do great and mighty things. A great book that I've been reading is called I Give You Authority by Charles Kraft. It says, it is as if God has deposited $1 million in a bank account for us, and we either do not realize it or cannot find the checkbook. Meanwhile, the enemy, who has less authority than we, has gone about his business of disrupting God's plan and tormenting God's people, and we do not know what to do about it. And he goes on later in the book to say, it's on the battlefield that we assume our authority, and it is the enemy of our general, Jesus, that we challenge when we exercise that authority. Every time we assert our authority, we are cutting into the domain of the imposter king who extorted it from our ancestor Adam. And according to Romans 16:20, it is God's desire that we press on with Jesus until that enemy is crushed under our feet. It even says when Jesus went to heaven that you will do more than what he did while he was here on earth. Now, I know that is tough to swallow and hard to believe about me or you doing more than what Jesus did. But God has given us authority over the enemy in this world and great power. But it's up to us to tap into that power under his authority. We unfortunately rarely operate in that power and walk in victory for very long because we choose to walk out from underneath the power that he has given us. Jesus says, I came to give you life to the fullest, not just for a little time and to be destroyed for the 50 or 60 or 70 years while you're here on this earth and then you die. He says, I'll give you authority in my name, and you're to walk in that authority and live as boldly as he did. It didn't matter what Jesus was walking into. He always walked in authority, not with arrogance, but authority. He knew who he was, and with that came the ability to do great and mighty things. Now, did Jesus receive a backlash when he performed miracles and healed the sick or saved a wretched man's soul? Well, of course he did. So why is it that we should experience anything different? When you begin praying and loving the unlovely, isn't it ironic that they or the things around them inevitably become worse? I see it happen all the time. A great friend of mine recently was thrown into a really, really tough situation with her brother who's an alcoholic. As she attended a church service, no less, he called her right in the middle of it in a drunken stupor to come to his rescue. She quickly got up and left the service and tried to help him. But to no avail, things only escalated, and before the night was over, she had to call the police on her own brother for his safety, and he was carted off to jail to sober up until the next day. This woman had told me the only thing she could do to help him was that she could offer him Jesus. He would be the only one that could save her brother, not from the enemy, but from himself. She began praying for his soul and his healing, because he had been living a life that was tormented after a car accident where he was driving and it took the life of his girlfriend years ago. Living with that guilt and shame has put him on a path of destruction, and Satan loves it. But my friend has gone to battle for her brother in prayer and has asked me to do the same with her. And wouldn't you know it, as soon as we amped up the praying, she became very, very sick. And she's a very, very healthy woman, loves the Lord, and is a great prayer warrior. But once we opened that can, so to speak, to call on God and all of heaven to save her brother, all of hell came against her. She not only was sick physically, but she became saddened and depressed mentally. She didn't want to get out of bed. She didn't want to attend her Bible study, and she felt as though she was in a very dark place and didn't want to live life normal. After seeing her about a week after the incident and her telling me how she had been feeling, and after all had taken place with her brother, I told her, hey, no worries. This is right on time. I really didn't even feel sorry for her sickness. Not because I was insensitive, but because I knew we had rattled the cages of hell and they were all riled up against her and they were trying to defeat her. You got to remember, the enemy doesn't go quietly. The only time he goes is when you come against him in the authority in which you have been given, and then he knows he can't stay at all. That authority is in the name of Jesus and no other name. How many times was Jesus persecuted for hanging out with the tax collectors or the prostitutes? The Pharisees came at him all the time. Don't expect anything different from our standpoint either. I think when you know it's coming, you're better prepared for it. Jesus knew what was coming, but was never shaken by it, and he always walked in the authority given to him by his Father. And it's funny, I rarely get to teach or write a message where I don't feel the backlash of its content. Only because I know that someone is either A, going to be set free, or B, someone's going to see a breakthrough. I'll take just last week when I taught about being divided and not unified with your family. Well, as you can imagine, I found myself in a great deal of circumstances where people were either being divided or I was in it with the people who were divided, and the enemy was relentless in his antics to keep me upset and all those involved coming against each other, and many suffered for it. I quickly recognized it was the enemy, and he was not happy with what I was going to be teaching, and therefore I felt the backlash of the breakthrough that was about to come for many. Backlash is defined as a sudden, forceful backward movement or recoil, or a strong or violent reaction. It also can be known as a backfire or repercussion or boomerang effect. Breakthrough, however, is defined as a military movement or advance all the way through and beyond an enemy's frontline defense. Wow. When I read and learned that definition, I knew there was probably always going to be some kind of retaliation when I pressed through to get a breakthrough, whether that was for me or someone else that I was praying for. It makes the fight easier to handle knowing you are about to get beyond the enemy's front line. I know when it happens to me that it is not coming from the person that wears the skin in front of me, but of the ruler of this world that's trying to destroy you and me at every turn. I believe once you realize that, then you will have the upper hand and know that without a shadow of a doubt that God is working on your behalf and that the answer to your prayers or the breakthrough is just about to happen. As many of you know, the Lord gave me a clever little saying of just one more a couple years ago. I have even had bracelets made that have the saying on them of just one more in the letters JOM, just to help remind me to be in constant prayer for just one more. Many times when my prayer partners and I are going to battle for a lost soul or for one that's hurting, we will say that we're jamming, meaning that we're praying to take just one more to heaven with us. And many times in the days and the weeks to follow, we have all experienced unexplainable physical ailments, horrible pain, headaches, overall sickness, and even spiritual and emotional stress. We are overcome by a spirit of defeat or depression, when only a few short days ago everything was just fine and we felt as though nothing could come against us. We know, though, that we're in the trenches for those people, and we are only doing what any other soldier would do in a time of war when the enemy attacks. And that is, we fight. I know there's been so many times when I have traveled to the jails to minister to hurting women that I have a pain so great in my left shoulder that it feels as though someone has stabbed me with a knife directly in that shoulder blade. What's really crazy is that blade will be there until I physically pull off the jail's property. I have laughed out loud in my car as I turn out of their parking lot knowing the pain was gone, knowing that I had just experienced the backlash of breakthrough. The pain was instantly gone and doesn't return until the day I get ready to go back into the jail the following week. And it was on those nights that women who were so desperately seeking and so ready to end their lives heard about a Father who loved them and had a plan for them. And although they were going to go back to their jail cells, still behind bars, they were now set free from the enemy and that had been believing so many of his lies that they would always be this way, that no one loved them, or that they would have this addiction for the rest of their lives. Every single time I go there, I know I'm stepping into the devil's playground. And there are nights I wonder, will this be the night that something goes wrong terribly? I wonder, will I come out of here okay? I know I'm prayed up and I'm prayed over, but there is a whole lot of evil going on in those walls, and sometimes it even decides to come to Bible study right there in the jailhouse to trip me up and hinder what the Lord has for the other women. I often feel the ramifications of doing God's work, but I'm not afraid of that for 1 minute. 2 Thessalonians 3, verses 2 and 3 says, "And I pray that we may be delivered from wicked and evil people, for not everyone has faith. But the Lord is faithful, and he will strengthen you and protect you from the evil one." That's reassuring to me when I travel into dark places. Let it be an encouragement to you as well as you travel to those dark places for the ones that you love. Look at what Jesus did when he went to the cross. His disciples could not understand what was going on and why all of this would happen to their Messiah, the one who had come to save their souls and to save us all from an eternal life in hell. He felt all of hell come against him on that cross. Good Friday is a day we celebrate as the day that Jesus paid the ultimate price for us. But as Mark 15:33 says, at the 6th hour, darkness came over the entire land until the 9th hour. The skies were made black at midday. It was truly the darkest just before the dawn of Jesus' resurrection. The sun was not going to shine on this particular Friday. And no, it wasn't a cloudy day like we've been experiencing here during our dark winter months. It was a black and dark day, like the deep dark of night when we see it about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. Do you feel like that Friday? Does your world feel like Sunday will never come? I know I felt those seasons where you cry out just like Jesus did, saying, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Just remember this. Sunday is coming. It always comes. And that there has to be a Friday before we can ever usher in a Sunday on any given week. For some of us, we just want to go straight to Easter morning. We don't want to feel the pain and the suffering that comes from those times that make us bleed and hurt our hearts and when we feel as though we have been left for dead. But here's the best part of all. Jesus knows that better than anyone, and he can empathize with you. And he does. He knows your pain, and he sees you pressing through to the dawn. He sees when you're fasting and praying for the one who could care less where their soul will spend eternity. But you know, and you can't bear the fact that if God has put them in your life, that you may be the only Jesus that they could ever see. So you press on through fasting and prayer. You can't bear the fact that though they only live for today, but you know that there is a tomorrow coming. And if they don't know Jesus today, all they may ever know is Satan and their tomorrows. Friends, we have a lot of work to do. We have many battles to fight. God says in 2 Thessalonians 3, verse 13, "As for you, brethren, do not become weary or lose heart and do right, but continue in well-doing without weakening." Meaning, don't give up in fighting the good fight. Don't give up when the enemy is pressing in. Do like Jesus and give yourself to the Lord. Jesus said in his darkest hour, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. We too have to commit our lives to the Father. We have to trust what he is doing, even when it feels like everything in our world is falling apart. Even when you are doing all the right things and not seeing any results. Just think about the disciples for a few minutes when they had traveled with Jesus all this time and had seen miracle after miracle and people after people being healed and saved from not only demons, but from their lifelong sickness. They had to say as well, Lord, save yourself. This cannot be the plan here. And in that moment, they could not have seen the great outcome that Jesus knew was about to take place. Maybe you too stand where the disciples did on that day that Jesus was arrested. Maybe you too cannot understand what in the world is going on. This is terrible, and it looks like the end. You have to remember, God is in control, and he will turn everything out for our good if we will just trust him. Do you trust him when things look the darkest? Will you be like Daniel when he came face to face with the Divine One and he heard straight from his mouth that he did hear you and he was coming for you? Would you graciously take the backlash for a breakthrough? Jesus did that for you. He literally took every lashing for every man, woman, and child for us only to know what a breakthrough would look like. That, my friend, is and was the ultimate sacrifice. Our retaliation may only be for a brief moment in time. So don't be discouraged by the enemy and his tactics, because when you go to battle for someone else's soul and you even bear those battle wounds, you will have something greatly in common with the one who bears them all, Jesus. Won't it be incredible someday when you get to physically touch the nail-scarred hands that took the greatest battle wound of all for you and for me? I hope you are there with me someday, so that we all may rejoice in our sufferings together and hear those long overdue words of, well done, my good and faithful servant. The war is won, and you stand victorious. You will be able to wear the victor's crown and relish in the fact that it was all worth it, and that because of your diligence in fighting the war, many stand beside you today and give praises to Jesus that he intersected your lives together for just one moment in time, so that they too will know Jesus.
Oh, no, you never let go. Lord, you never let go of me.
Thank you for being with us for this edition of Journey Living with Shannon Meyer. If you'd like to hear this program again or learn more about Journey Living Ministries or even contact Shannon, her website is journeylivingministries.org. Shannon also teaches a Bible study for women on Tuesday nights at 7 at Union Station in Bellefontaine, and she's also available to speak at events. And we'd love for you to join us again next Thursday morning at 9 for Journey Living with Shannon Meyer on Shine FM.